We are out in Oyster Bay, Long Island. I'm standing in front of the Rough Rider statue of Teddy Roosevelt. Now, he looks a little bit like Robin Williams, but obviously it's Teddy Roosevelt, not Robin Williams. Teddy was from Oyster Bay, and his mother lodge was the Matinecock Lodge, and we're about to meet a brother from that lodge who's been such a great resource for me. He's an archivist with the Underhill Society. I've mentioned them before. I could not have made these videos without their help. We had a couple of Underhills as founding members of our lodge, and obviously we also talked about Lord Underhill, and they really helped me a lot with that research. We're going to do a little bit of a walking tour of Oyster Bay, right around where Matinecock Lodge is, and he's going to point out some very interesting things that tie back to the American Revolution. Now, back then, this was a British stronghold. Most of the residents here were Loyalists. We're about 22, 23 miles away from East Setauket, where the Culper Spy Ring was centered around. And this particular brother is one of the nation's leading experts in the Culper Spy Ring, and we're not going to get too much into that today, but we will talk about it, and we will be focusing on that in a future video. So we're in front of Matinecock Lodge number, what's your number?
806.
806, and I'm with Brother Steve Russell Boerner, and he is, what's your role in life? I know you got like a million things, right?
I'm a professional archivist, and been the archivist of the Underhill Society of America for 15 years, hard to believe. And we are tenants of the lodge where we're standing.
Okay. So let's take a walk. We're gonna walk over to a special grave in Oyster Bay, right?
Yeah. So this is West Main Street. East Main Street is over that way. What it's been said is that the difference is the Dutch and the English. This is a very old road here. When the pioneers settled here in 1653, this road here was one of the first, and it wrapped around to the west. And this is the Townsend family. They came here in the 1700s, so later, and this was the original homestead, and their holdings, the land holdings, went down up to the north here, salt marsh, which was very important to these pioneers. They were livestock ranchers, and they needed it for insulation, for winter feed for their livestock. And if you turn this way, their holdings went to the south, and right after that white house, it slopes up. And this was in Orchard. So where we're going to walk up to, you see the top of those trees up there, is where the British built the fort. And they occupied
which fort was that?
There, I forget the name of it, but there's Fortified Hill, and they had a fort up there. They occupied, and the officer Simcoe, John Graves Simcoe, who became the first governor of Canada after he went back to England and then went to Canada, he occupied this Raynham Hall house. So this was an important area for them. The Queen's Rangers were stationed up there. And then continued. I think this is probably where their line was. That road there is Pine Hollow Road, runs north-south. It runs all the way to Jericho. Now, Jericho was an important crossroads because it had a fort that's so named by the locals Fort Nonsense. And we were involved with David Griffin and treasure hunters one weekend. My Historical Society, Cedar Swamp Historical Society, sponsored that and tried to find the fort. We found artifacts from that time period.
Oh, that's wild.
So we know they were down there, and that road was important, that intersection, because it was the road from Homestead, where it was also occupied by the British, all the way up to Lloyd Neck, which is northeast of here. And that's where the Loyalists were hunkered down for protection. And that's where, when after the war, they went to Halifax and New Brunswick, Canada, they were picked up there. So this area was important for the occupation, plus the firewood. And what's been said is this slope up of the Townsend land was an orchard, and apparently the British soldiers cut all the fruit trees down for firewood, but that's not smart if you like fruit or preserves, but that's what they said.
Well, if it's a cold winter, I guess you need some firewood.
Yeah, they denuded this island of trees for sure. That's one thing known. That Manhattan was, that was the primary thing, and they needed food, which was livestock here, and firewood, and so forth. So,
you want to take a walk?
Sure.
All right, let's go. So we're walking to a special grave, right?
Yeah, for sure. This is, again, we're walking south up the hill of the Townsend family's property back then.
And we're walking through what was once an orchard.
Right.
Okay.
So you'll see when we come up here, you see the drop in elevation where we just were?
Yeah, yeah.
So now here it gets steeper. So you can see here the historic sign, probably done in the 76.
Let's take a quick look at this here. Oh, the good old Queens Rangers. We've talked about them quite a bit in our series.
And if you look up that hill, quite steep here.
Oh, yeah, no doubt about it. All right, let's continue walking to this special grave. So we have a Simcoe Street here, huh?
That's right.
After John Graves.
Oyster Bay remembers its history. So this is the top of this hill. To the south here it slopes down, so we are at the top right here. Now, I don't know precisely where this fort was, but I would safe to say it's somewhere like right up here. And the thing that I've always wondered is signaling. We know George Washington extensively relied on signaling in New Jersey. The 22 hills he asked the governor to build with like a pyramid, triangle, firewood, hay, anything combustible. And it ran 22 of these signal stations, ran 100 miles. So they could see any troop movements from Manhattan. They knew eventually they were going to come south. So I believe that there was signaling here as well. So if you come back over here, now I mentioned Lloyd Neck earlier, where the Loyalist refugees were holding out protection. That direction over there, you see that tall blue spruce up there? We're directly in line with Lloyd Neck, where it was fortified, another hill. So I've always wondered if they could signal each other with smoke here, and then be able to look down at Pine Hollow Road here. You think about it, communications, transportation, critical. So they'd want to keep an eye on things from a high vantage point, including these roads. But to be able to signal as well would be very useful. And they could see, today we can't with the trees, but then they could see the harbor. So they could see if ships were coming in. We had a tremendous whaleboat problem with men who took advantage of the fog of war and attacked people on both sides. You know about that up in Ramapo and the pass and so forth. But here they came across from Connecticut at night in these whaleboats. It was armed robbery of people's homes. It was nasty.
Yeah, so basically we had pirates. I mean, that's right. So I know we talked a lot about in my series about the cowboys and the Skinners, and it's kind of the same thing. Just criminals will take advantage of what they can take advantage of.
Right.
So right now we're walking to Fort Hill Cemetery, correct?
Correct. So if you look over here to the north, right up here is the highest ground, that peak right in there, and it's all wooded still, which is interesting. Now we're looking over here to the east, and that down there is Pine Hollow Road, which I mentioned runs all the way down to Jericho, which was an important crossroads. So somewhere up here, the soldiers in the garrison would be able to watch movements there as well. And then down this way is the ancient Townsend family burial ground, which is where Robert Townsend is buried.
Well, let's go visit him. So, I mean, it makes sense that they would take the high ground here and set up some sort of fort, because obviously it gives them some sort of viewpoint or vantage point to just see if anyone's coming. So we're at Fort Hill Cemetery. You can see who is buried here. All right, let's go walk to the graves. I'll tell you, this would be such a cool place to do some archaeology and see what's buried here and stuff. All right, so we are at the Townsend family burial cemetery, right?
Yeah, burial ground for the family, private. Okay. It's established in 1668. So as I said earlier, this settlement, Oyster Bay, was settled and established in 1653.
Wow.
Townsends are pioneers.
Yeah.
They had, you know, in town, the town plot area, a town spot, sorry, and extensive land holdings.
Were they part of like the whole Underhill movement here too? Were they concurrent with?
They married fairly quickly. Families. Captain John Underhill had a good number of children, 8 children. His first wife was Dutch, came over from Holland with him, and died when they were living in Southold in the 1650s. And we think his only one of 3 children with her, Helena de Hooge, was his son John Jr. And he came to, first they went to Setauket, and there was a Quaker presence there, and which is a whole other conversation, but he didn't stay there very long, and then he came here. Well, he married Elizabeth Feek, which is another prominent pioneer family here, and she was a true Quaker. So when he remarried her, he had a new family. And
was Captain John Underhill a Quaker?
No, that's a good question.
We don't really know what he was.
I mean, he's listed as, you know, friend in the things. I couldn't tell you if it's one of those things you go along with what your wife wants to do.
Okay, understood.
With, you know, and his children were, some of them really stayed devout Quakers. It's interesting because he was obviously such a martial person. He was a critical. It'd
be kind of tough to be a Quaker and be who he was, right?
He, you know, but his previous life, you know,
I mean, he was basically a soldier, right?
He was in the 30 Years' War in the continent. Not many people know about that, but that was brutal, savage warfare. I mean, they gave no quarter. And when he came here to Massachusetts and Connecticut for these Puritan, they needed people like him. This was tough. It was existential. And he's also listed as a military engineer. So it tells me, like his contemporary in the Pequot War, Captain Lyon Gardner of Gardner's Island, he's also a military engineer. So what that tells me is that he probably, in addition to being a very good soldier and organizing people to, you know, into companies, militias, that he also knew how to build military fortifications, which would be critical. And I believe that he also knew surveying, so this would be like civil engineering, military-wise. And civil engineers can survey.
Like Kosciuszko and...
Right. So he, you know, by the time he came here, he was older, he had a big family growing, and he ended up helping the local Native Americans in their dealings with the aggressive Homestead Englishmen that came into this area. What I believe, and I'm working on, is that he was very much trying to make the present Nassau County Quaker, and they were not welcomed from the beginning. They're persecuted. When he was sheriff of Flushing, before he went out east, he signed the Flushing Remonstrance, which is one of the most important foundations of liberty in this country. He signed, he got arrested and so forth, so he was not a Quaker then, but he believed in their freedom of religion. So when
going back to that time period, I would assume that most of it was Anglican.
Very, very Anglican, and not tolerant.
Yeah.
I mean, the Dutch were, Stuyvesant wasn't tolerant, but he stood up for them. And
Stuyvesant was he a Dutch reform or?
Dutch, yeah. He was, okay. I don't know about reform, but but the thing where the Underhill Society is very rightfully and fact-based protective of Captain John's legacy, because too many people today just, Indian killer. Well, yeah, but first of all, you have to understand the context of the times. Second of all, he did much more than that. So it's very convenient for people with an agenda to just pigeonhole him in today's light politically as, we should not celebrate him, and that's not true.
I understand. From my perspective, I've tried in my series to be as factual as possible. And one of the issues is you look at something like the series Turn, and the way they paint John Graves Simcoe is just, it's not who he was. You see what he did after the war with, making slavery outlawed in Canada. And the person portrayed in Turn would not do all that stuff.
Right.
So
I was,
and also he would not have been accepted as a Masonic brother if he was as nasty a person as he was.
As you know, I'm cataloging Archivist in the Long Island collection, East Hampton, the Pennypack collection for 15 years. And big project that we did, I'm very proud of, with my volunteer and friend Frank Sorrentino, was transcribe the Townsend family documents, particularly Robert Townsend's account books. And we did that painstakingly, accurately, and precisely. And as we did this, we said, let's put it out for people like you that really want to see the facts and who, what, when, where, like detective. You have a name of interest, we indexed it. It's all there. So we're very proud of that work, and we hope that more people choose to use things like that, primary documents, that we made very intelligible by our cross indexes.
Oh yeah, it's great. Because you can search some of the documents and everything else.
We really, it's platinum standard in terms of archival.
No doubt about it.
Pleased I was able to do that with Frank.
I just hope more people utilize it, because there's a lot to discover there, I think.
There's so much. To me, it's just, Frank and I, as we did this, we said, the more we do, the more we know we don't know. But back to, you mentioned Turn, we were very involved with all this transcribing and so forth, indexing, when that came out. And I was involved with the Setauket historical group, who really celebrate their role in the revolution with Culper Spy Ring, and they do a great job up there. And I know some of them, say, I've never personally seen it, and all I've ever said is, listen, if it brings interest to the general audience that are not really that into this, fine. If it brings people to Setauket and Oyster Bay, and they're spending money and they're raising awareness to the municipalities that these places need to be protected, I'm all for it. I don't worry about that.
I actually have mixed feelings on this. I have a good friend, Dennis, and he's a reenactor, and he just hates the movie Patriot because it's just so inaccurate. And because he reenacts a British unit, it really gets to him that they show them like locking people in a church and burning them and stuff like that. I know it's for dramatic license, but I'd rather have them be a little bit more historically accurate, because you study the history. There's enough drama there that you could pull from that's factual. You don't really need to make up stuff.
You just took the words out of my mouth. I find fact way more fascinating than fiction. But again,
We're not
what
Hollywood
people want.
producers.
It's what people want.
So let's walk over and see some graves here.
So you see these old stones. There's a mix here, and some of these are quite rugged. Now, none of these stones were from Long Island. Long Island is created by glacial deposits, so everything is a terminal moraine. There are no jagged stones on Long Island. It's all rounded glaciers that wash. So
Yeah, my understanding is that Long Island was basically what the glaciers pushed, correct?
down,
Yeah.
this was the southern edge
Yep.
of the deposit. So this series of hills up here is newer than the series of hills in the middle, which like Bethpage, right down the middle of Hempstead Plains, and there's a big ridge right into Suffolk County. You have Half Hollow Hills, so forth. Those are actually the first hills. So, and then everything washed out that way, and the sound was created by, there's an inland lake created by this, and then the sea eventually opened, turned into an estuary. The Long Island Sound is a unique body of water in the world, just incidentally. It's the only body of water in the world that's influenced by two separate tidal ranges. The open ocean to the east, over off Connecticut, the race.
And then what, the river's feeding
And
it?
very
or-
minimally, but it's influenced by the East River coming out of New York
Okay.
Harbor.
Yeah, no, that
Very
makes
minimally,
sense. Yep,
but
yep.
that's Hell Gate, which is very important to the Revolution as well. That's supposedly when the British got out, evacuated in 1783, Manhattan, supposedly they dumped their coin money into Hell Gate, the bottom.
Oh, did they really?
That's what they say, yeah.
So, you
we'll
know-
have to do a scuba diving expedition.
No, I know, right? But so I know in your work you covered some of the coinage.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
So,
Frank.
so the stuff that was dumped there, was that couldn't have been gold and silver? They wouldn't have dumped that there.
I forget exactly what they did, but
Because that
Frank
stuff is too
Sorrentino,
valuable,
who
yeah.
I mentioned,
Yep.
is a great colonial coin collector. That's how I met him. He brought his phenomenal species into paper and metal into me in the Long Island collection, and I said, "This is amazing." I said, "We should do an event together, a program here at the East Hampton Library on history, using our old account books, you know, blacksmith, shoemakers. Later we did whaling, but for his event, it was excellent. We used his currency, real currency, including Dutch shillings, and the Long Island collection has wampum, which was in use still, and British coinage, Spanish guineas.
I imagine doubloons too, or
Eights. What's that?
doubloons too?
I forget that.
Spanish doubloon.
I don't recall that name.
Oh, okay.
But I remember
All right.
the pieces of 8, very big, because they would cut
Okay.
these coins. They would cut these coins into eighths, and they would use that.
Pieces of 8, yeah.
Yep. So we used that and used the account books that referenced these coinage and tied it in.
Oh, okay.
And that was a great lecture. And then I jokingly suggested to Frank, I thought, see the guy once in a while, and I said, you should volunteer in here. And before I could get the words out, finish the sentence, he said, I'd love to. I said, really? He was retired, very bright guy.
You know, it's hard to find people that are like valuable like that, who want to get involved and do some hard work, and
It's amazing.
and the stuff you guys produce is pretty amazing.
So the way it started was that moment. I said, well, what would you like to, he said, I'd like to transcribe these account books. I said, you could do whatever you want. We all liked them personally as well. I said, you can do whatever you want. So I would digitize account books, and he would take pages home, and all week work 2 hours a day. And what's interesting, and I think useful and instructive for people, is here's a guy who didn't think he liked history, and he became a great collector of all these history, and he realized that he liked history, loved it, but from a new angle. So when people say they don't like history, it doesn't make sense, because everything has history. So I think people should look into things that they love and then take it from that point of view. So we ended up doing Robert Townsend's account book when he was the spy, his primary year, 1779 to 81. And we ended up going back to 1773 all the way through 1790. We wanted it was very important to us to do the full range so that we had a three-dimensional perspective.
Almost like before, middle, and after.
Right.
Yeah, no,
during
understand.
and after. We wanted people to be able, like you, to have this great body of work. I think we did 8 or 9.
Yeah, you guys did a ton of work,
including his father Samuel, who was arrested by the British here. So, you know, hopefully we continue this. It's amazing. It'll last forever, that work.
Where's the grave?
Over here.
Let's walk over there. All right, so I see a Revolutionary War veteran soldier
That's him
here.
over there.
And who was this? Do you know? Let's see. It doesn't say.
This one?
Yeah, it says a soldier here.
I don't know.
Yep.
But Robert's there.
With the American flag here?
Yep.
Okay. Oh, the poor guy's like right up against the fence, isn't he? That's a shame.
And not the best stone.
No, I know. You know, unfortunately,
they didn't do well with the elements.
Yeah, the stone they used back then, because we have quite a few colonial graves too. They don't last, sadly.
Right.
It'd be kind of nice if they put a little plaque explaining who he was and everything, you know.
Right.
So.
I know he is.
You do, but
I know.
Unfortunately, most people don't follow this stuff. So.
Yeah, but they did a nice job here, though. Since last time I was here, they've done a nice job. So now we're facing north again, looking towards Raynham Hall and town. This is towards the harbor. Now, where this Norway maple is, over that yellow house chimney, you could see land. If it was winter, we could probably see the water, Oyster Bay Harbor. That land out there is Laurel Hollow towards Lloyd Neck, which I mentioned also was a very important fort and where Loyalists lived. It wasn't great. But the British had people and supplies and so forth brought there, and then the road went all the way down to Homestead. That was their artery. So again, what I said earlier, up here you could probably see on a clear day or a night signaling. I don't know. It's just something that I'm interested in trying to figure out.
Well, you know, talking about Oyster Bay during that time period, you know, I've mentioned before in the video series that, you know, the only way to get around back then was you either had to walk, take a horse, or you go by water. And that was a main thoroughfare, wasn't it? From Oyster Bay to Connecticut. And
absolutely, yeah. And that's why we think the north side of Long Island, particularly Nassau County here, Suffolk County was pretty much Patriot, but they were also considered themselves New Englanders, which is interesting, whereas here you had the Dutch mix with the English, and some Dutch stayed insular. So if you look at Nassau County, and Queens County was part of back then, it was a mix. You had, like up here was I don't know about mostly, but this is where you found your Patriots. And speculate is that the connections across the Sound to Rye, New York, Connecticut were easier, like you said, by boat. These people were all capable, you know, with everything, sailing, rowing, horseback riding. And the roads, of course, weren't always great. You know, in springtime, mud is a big consideration. Also dangerous.
I was going to say you had to worry about highwaymen too.
Highwaymen, so forth. So definite connection up there, and easy on a. I mean, the Indians used to row across on a clear day. So I just wonder if it's capable. We should test that to see. I mentioned New Jersey earlier. I missed it, unfortunately, but they had a, I think it was 225th anniversary celebration of those signals on those 22 hills. And what they did was they had those powerful strobe lights, and they all went off together.
Oh, that had to be really cool.
Yeah. I would love to have seen that.
Yeah, that would be cool.
But that's something to consider.
No, I know. It's so funny that we just ran into someone who is descendant from both John Underhill and Robert Townsend. And it's, yeah, and I guess if you grew up in Oyster Bay, it's a high likelihood that you have some relation, right?
It's deep roots. The people are still here.
Yeah, that's funny.
You know, the names may have changed, but so many people up here are still around, descended from these original families.
Oh, makes sense.
Thank God.
Yeah. You know, we're talking about the Loyalists. I mean, my buddy Dennis always tells a joke. What do you call a Loyalist after the American Revolution?
What?
A Canadian.
That's right.
So,
yeah, I call them Yanks.
But we're talking like you have ancestry up there.
I do. My mother's from St. John, New Brunswick, ironically enough. And I grew up in Homestead, just south of here, which was Loyalist. So many of them went up there. Not as many Long Islanders were forced to go up as I thought, and honestly was hoping, just from a historical perspective, because I go up there and visit my family. It's a beautiful part of the world, nice people, and through Underhill Society, we've made a nice connection with the Loyalist historical groups up there. We're members now, and
yeah, and in fact, one of the Underhills that I talked about was Lord Underhill from Westchester County, and he escaped after the war. And the interesting thing about him is that he gave to Robert Rogers all his documentation so he could get reparations from the British Empire after the war. And Robert Rogers obviously died, or I don't remember exactly what happened to him, but wow. It's just kind of funny, you know, it was all lost. And that was like right in the neighborhood I grew up in, so.
Well, the connections for Long Island here up there are strong. The first mayor of St. John was John Parr. It was called Parrtown. And he, I believe, is when he lived here in Nassau County, Queens County then, in the Hempstead Plains. It's fascinating to me. As a matter of fact, he, some historical reference, I have to find it, they mention up in Canada the Hempstead Plains, which is the only naturally occurring prairie in eastern United States.
Wow.
Just south of here.
Yeah.
That's a whole other conversation. But my family has a beautiful camp up in the country in Belle Isle Bay, tributary connection of the St. John River. And up there, I did some research. You walk around the burial grounds, beautiful, beautiful region. And I believe that the road that their camp is adjoining was laid out by a man from right here.
Oh wow!
And surveyed. So for me, of course, my background, that's even
that's
cooler.
Another thing you do. You're a surveyor. Among the very many things that you do, you're a man of a lot of talents for sure.
I don't know about that last part, but but it's fascinating to see the connections, and I love keeping in touch with them up there and inviting them here.
I mean, would it be fair to say that it was a small world back then?
I'd say so, yeah. And, you know, as you know, my Historical Society, Cedar Swamp, we have an annual Hessian Christmas-themed event for the Revolution. And I know that it's frowned upon by many as celebrating the enemy. But, you know, if anybody bothered to get off their keyboard and actually show up and live and people and listen to us and see what we're really about, it's not a celebration. I mean, it's a commemoration. Okay, so this was America's first Civil War, particularly here, your area, Manhattan, Westchester, right? And families were divided.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. I look at Stephen Ward, who I've talked about a lot of times in my videos, and he was part of the committee to detect and defeat Loyalist conspiracies. And on that committee, part of his role was to seize his brother's properties because he was a Loyalist.
Right. It was nasty.
And you mentioned that you had some people stay behind. We had the same thing, and Stephen Ward's brother stayed behind after the war, even though he had lost a lot of his property and everything.
Right.
So I don't know if they reconciled after the war or not, but it just had to be a brutal time. Like, you didn't know who to trust and where people stood. And we talk about politics today being nasty, but you weren't worrying about your neighbor plotting to kill you because they disagreed with you.
Right. Yeah, it was tough.
So this was the Townsend house, you said?
Right, it's the Raynham Hall. This is the original part of the house, and they were wealthy merchants. They owned ships. One of their sons was out at sea during the war. The father, Samuel, was outspoken and arrested. And the thing people need to understand here in Oyster Bay Township was 80% of the voters, the male inhabitants, were Loyalists. So the Patriots were a distinct minority. So after the war, it was this kind of unspoken, well, I hope you learned your lesson. They were not forced to go to Canada, to St. John or Nova Scotia. They stayed. So I like to remind people that, most of these descendants are Loyalist. So they should think about that it's, as I was saying, with the Hessians and Loyalists, we are commemorating the history here, and we're also trying to show how relevant it is to today. That's very important to me, is that people understand it's not something in a vacuum, that it's the only thing that changes is technology, but other than that, it's all the same. So it's very instructive. It's not some abstract thing.
No, one of the things I've tried to do is understand the Loyalist position, because I really didn't get it. But in studying I understand now, like, a lot of people looked at the American Revolution like we were just going to resort into just total, absolute anarchy and chaos, because what they established had never really been done before.
I don't judge them. Who are we to judge anybody back then? But in terms of trying to understand them, to me it's not hard, because you think about it, they were fourth, fifth generation after the pioneer settlements. So here they had these nice farms, they had stability, they were happy to be here. They were American, but they were still British. And they were risking losing everything. And who knows, they thought maybe they have to go back. I don't know, but it's just a remarkable story, honestly. It's the American Revolution, and the fact that these...
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And you even look at some of the founding fathers, they did everything they could to stay under the British Empire. Because, I mean, you look at the Huguenots and some of the other groups, I mean, what they went through in their home countries, like the Huguenots were terribly treated in France.
Right.
And they fled France, and England welcomed them with open arms. And that's why I think a lot of the Huguenots fought on the side of the British, because they appreciated that the British Empire had given them freedom, and they were probably afraid of losing that.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's right.
So we're back at the lodge right now, right?
Right. Yeah, we're on the porch.
Yeah. So
we had our Independence Day event twice. Hopefully resume that.
What are all these names here?
These are various Mason families that
let's take a look
did
here.
This to help support the new construction here.
We got a District Deputy Grand Master here, brothers. Wow, there's a whole bunch of names here, huh? When were these stones put in?
In honor of their families, legacies.
Do you know when any of these stones were put in?
When? I would say when they rebuilt this, 2003.
So this is not the original lodge building. Unfortunately, that burnt down.
Unfortunately, the original burned in 2003, and they were able to rescue like the Bible that Theodore Roosevelt was sworn in on when he was president, which we still have inside. Lost a lot, but this is a nice building.